My name is Allison. I'm 32 years old, and I was 26 when I built an algorithm that could detect early stage pancreatic cancer with 94.7% accuracy. 4 years of work, no vacations, missed weddings, missed birthdays. When it finally worked, I put the data on my father's desk. He looked at me and said, "This is it, Ellie." 8 months later, he sat at the head of our dining table and told me they'd sold the company, sold my algorithm for $2 billion. Then he said four words, "Now leave, you're fired." What none of them knew was that 2 years earlier, I had quietly done one thing that was about to completely unravel their entire deal. If you truly love and appreciate your parents, take just 1 second to subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to us. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which country are you watching from? I'd been working at Nova Biogen, my parents' biotech company, since I was 22, straight out of MIT. No gap year, no backpacking Europe. I walked off the graduation stage straight into a lab coat because that's what our family did. We worked. My father, Richard Mercer, had built the company over 20 years through sheer stubbornness. My mother, Carol, ran operations with military precision. They were formidable, and I loved them deeply. That part matters. The algorithm I spent 4 years developing targeted something the industry had been trying to crack for over a decade, identifying pancreatic cancer at stage 1 instead of stage 4, when it's usually already too late. I tested it, failed, rebuilt it, tested again. I skipped my best friend's wedding mid-testing cycle. I missed holidays, birthdays, at least 2 relationships that deserved better from me. When the blind trial results finally came back beyond anything we'd projected, I cried in the lab bathroom for 10 minutes, then walked out and handed the printed data to my father. 8 months later, acquisition talks started. I knew larger pharmaceutical companies were interested. That was expected once we filed patents and published early findings. What I didn't know was how far my parents had taken those conversations without me. I found out by accident, standing in a hallway with coffee going cold in my hand, overhearing my father's voice through a door that hadn't fully latched, discussing numbers, restructuring, transition timelines. In 30 seconds, I understood the deal was already done. I confronted them that evening at the same dining table where we'd celebrated every company milestone for 20 years. My father told me plainly they'd accepted a $2 billion offer from Brent Callaway, a pharmaceutical conglomerate founder, full acquisition, clean transfer of everything. Then he said it, calm and rehearsed, "Now leave, you're fired." The silence after that wasn't dramatic. It was worse than dramatic, the kind of quiet that means something has broken past the point of noise. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to soften it. Instead, she gave me a small, almost apologetic smile and said, "We sold our business, Allison. This was always ours to sell." My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "So you sold my code?" She laughed, not cruelly, just casually, which somehow made it worse, and repeated the same line like it explained everything. What none of them knew was about to walk into that boardroom the next day. The meeting with Brent Callaway happened the following afternoon. I was there technically, functionally invisible, while he finalized language with my parents. Then he stood up, straightened his jacket, and looked directly at me. Not my father, not my mother, me. He said one word, "Actually." Brent wasn't a man who wasted words. 20 years of acquisitions had made him precise to a fault, so that single word silenced the entire room. He opened a thin folder and slid a document toward my father. His legal team had flagged something 48 hours earlier. The core algorithm, representing roughly 70% of the company's entire valuation, wasn't filed under Nova Biogen's intellectual property at all. It was filed independently, under the name of the individual developer. He paused. Under Allison Mercer. My father picked up the document. I watched his face rearrange itself as he read. My mother leaned over to look. Neither of them said a word. 2 years earlier, I had sat in the office of a private IP attorney, completely unconnected to the company's legal team, and filed a separate, independent patent for the core sequencing methodology under my own name, not the company's, mine. I'd done it quietly, correctly, airtight from the start, not out of suspicion or foresight, but because a mentor at MIT had once told me that ownership isn't assumed, it's documented. I never mentioned it to anyone because at the time it didn't feel like a secret. It just felt like basic professional sense. In that moment, it became the single most important decision I had ever made. Brent looked straight at me. "Your parents sold me the infrastructure, the brand, the contracts, the equipment, and the secondary patents. What they didn't have the authority to sell me was the algorithm, because it was never theirs." He closed the folder. I essentially bought a $2 billion company built around technology I now need to license separately from the person who was just told she's fired. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever experienced. My father set the document down and looked at me with something I'd never seen on his face before. Not anger. Genuine uncertainty, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time and realizing he'd completely misjudged who I was. My mother had stopped smiling entirely, staring at her hands. I want to be honest, the easy version of this story has me feeling triumphant. I didn't. I felt grief and relief layered over each other so completely I couldn't separate them. These were still my parents, the people who taught me to love science, who built something real from nothing. Cutting me out didn't erase 26 years. It just complicated them. Watching their composure fall apart wasn't a victory. It was the most painful version of being right I've ever lived through. But I was still right, and that mattered. Brent's team contacted my attorney within 24 hours. We negotiated a licensing agreement giving his company rights to commercialize the algorithm, which I agreed to because the technology existed to save lives, and that purpose was never negotiable for me. In exchange, I received a licensing fee structure that, over the first 3 years alone, generated more than every salary I'd ever drawn from Nova Biogen combined. I also secured an independent research budget and full credit on every future publication built on my methodology. I wasn't going to disappear from the work I'd spent a decade building. My parents and I didn't speak for 7 months after that meeting. When we finally did, it was my mother who called first. No grand apology, just something quieter, that she hadn't fully understood what she was doing when she did it, which is different from saying she didn't do it. I told her I understood the distinction. We're still rebuilding, slowly. Some things take longer to repair than they took to break, but we're trying, and that has to mean something.